Hi there. Lindsey Sparks here with the next episode of Read by the Author. Today, we continue Echo in Time, the first book in the Echo Trilogy, read by the author, which is me, Lindsey Sparks. And now, let's return to the story. Chapter 19, There and Gone. Life, I was quickly learning, is very similar to war. The latter, it has been said, is filled with years and years of relentless boredom, routine, and monotony, interspersed with brief moments of sheer terror. Sorry, I'm just laughing at my past self. I'm sure I thought I was being very philosophical there, whereas I feel like I've read that similar things in dozens of books since this. Author's note. Anyway. In the case of life, the boredom is broken up by spikes of excitement morphing from joy to despair, hatred to love, and from passion to disgust. I had been in the boredom phase for the first 24 years of my life. I wasn't anymore. Unfortunately, life and war decided to converge and throw everything they had at me all at once. I had more excitement than I knew what to do with. My father was a psychotic, evil megalomaniac. An ancient prophecy placed the fate of humans and Negerettes in my hands, and I was falling for an ancient and volatile God-inspiring man. The life I had worked so hard for was disintegrating all around me. I didn't think things could get any worse. So, am I right in assuming this is the place you mentioned at dinner the other night? Your line's, compound? I asked. My voice felt appropriately unused. Neither Marcus nor I had broken the thick silence since leaving my apartment, and we'd been in the car together for over 2 hours. Yes. Unlike mine, his voice was perfect, smooth as silk and deep as the ocean. I watched classically constructed stone and brick buildings pass by my window. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought we'd entered a nearly abandoned Ivy League college campus. And we're here because... You'll be staying here until we leave for the excavation. You want me to stay here for 4 months? I spluttered. I don't have a car. The university's 2 hours and a ferry ride away. How will I get there? How will I help with the excavation prep? And Jesus, Marcus, don't we need to talk to the police about what happened in my apartment? I'll take care of it. I made a rough sound, part snort, part laugh. What about my life? Marcus stopped the car in the roundabout driveway of an enormous chateau-like building constructed from pale gray stone. This is your life now, he told me. And if I don't want it to be? I asked through gritted teeth as I glared out the window. I was acting like a bratty teenager, something that had been happening way too often lately, but I didn't care. I figured the prophesied messiah of an entire species deserved a little leeway. Marcus reached out and clenched my jaw in his hand, turning my face toward him. Grow up, Lex. You don't have the luxury of an independent life anymore. You are our only chance. You are the future of our people. You are so much more than this childish facade. His touch softened, turning tender, but his eyes retained their fierce golden glow. I've seen what's inside you. When you work, when you flirt, when you kiss, you're a woman with the ferocity and cunning of a lioness. We need you to be that woman, that Lex. Wide-eyed, I stared at him. Now, you may be happy to hear we're moving the pit to one of the meeting rooms in the main house. You'll still be an active participant in the excavation and its planning, but you won't have to dodge assassination and kidnapping attempts like you would on campus. My eyes narrowed. Assassination attempts? Who... There is a small offshoot of our kind that believes Nguyen's prophecy could be averted by ending your life. I guess they skipped the part of the prophecy where my death is the death of the world, I grumbled. So it would seem, he agreed. Marcus exited the car and joined me on the passenger side to help me out. Come, Carlyle's staff will take your cat and bag up to your suite. There are some matters we must attend to before... He seemed to catch himself. Before what? Nothing. he said, dismissing my question. "It's unimportant." But I recognized the look in his eyes as he turned away. Pain, sorrow. He was lying to me. Whatever he was withholding was very important. Swallowing my desperate urge to badger Marcus until he enlightened me, I walked beside him into the exquisite building. For once he didn't hold my hand. After we walked down a wide hallway, we entered an expansive, modernly furnished room in the back corner of the enormous home. The couches and chairs were all upholstered in various shades of black, gray, and white, and the square coffee table appeared to be a solid slab of polished granite. Black and white prints of people's faces and other more sensual body parts decorated the walls, and there was an elaborate fireplace carved from some white-veined black stone on the far wall. Carlisle, Dominic, Josh, and Neffy awaited us in the room, along with 2 pairs of unfamiliar men and women. My heater is clicking. Hold on. All 8 people rose and instantly fell to their knees with bowed heads. "I live to serve, Meswet. My life is yours, Meswet. May you live forever," they intoned as one. Meswet, girl child, I translated in my head. It was from Nguyen's prophecy, the girl child of Set, the girl child of Ivan. Even Neffy was kneeling in submission. My mouth grew instantly parched, my cheeks heated. What am I supposed to do? Marcus leaned in close to me and whispered, "I accept your life and service. Negeretz, may I prove worthy. Rise." I repeated his words with numb clarity, sounding cold and resolute. All 8 Negeretz rose when I commanded it and watched me with guarded expressions. "Please, sit," I said, upon realizing why they were still standing. They did, though they didn't stop staring at me. I shot a furious glare at Marcus. He should have warned me. He smiled, a sad twist of his lips, and spoke to the group. "As you all know, the Meswet Alexandra will be staying here until we depart for Kemet," he said, using the ancient Egyptians' name for their homeland in lieu of the Western world's modern label. After all 8 Negeretz nodded in acquiescence, Marcus faced me. "This group constitutes the core of your guard." "My guard?" I repeated, astonished. And then, when I didn't think my world could revert any further into an archaic, fantastical realm, Marcus explained each guardsman's role. "Each Negeret present is of my line, more or less. I trust them above all others, and they will protect you with their lives. On that you have my word." Marcus held his hand out toward the man and woman seated furthest left in the room, on a charcoal-swayed couch. "Heimdall and Saga," he said, apparently telling me their names. Both were tall and slender, with crystal blue eyes and fair coloring. I would have wagered my trivial savings account balance that they were siblings, if not twins. "They are 2 of the most talented seers alive. At least one of them will be scouring your potential futures for danger at all times." He paused and divided a sharp, agitated look between them. "Which one of you should be doing right now? Why is neither of you in the At?" Heimdall bowed his head in deference. "Apologies, Father. Apologies, Meswet. We have been having difficulty finding her future in the At," Saga said, finishing his explanation fluidly. "It's being hidden by someone. Perhaps her father?" "No," Marcus said thoughtfully. "It's not Set. She was hidden from him as well. Lex," he looked at me, "you aren't by any chance concealing your future in the At, are you?" Baffled, I shook my head. "Not that I know of." After a hesitant pause, I said, "But is it possible to conceal myself without meaning to?" "Damn it, Lex," Marcus growled, earning a chorus of hisses from the women and an admonishing "Heru" from Dominic. Appeasing him, Marcus modified his statement, though his eyes sparkled with irritation. "Meswet, if anyone could do such a thing, I have no doubt it would be you. You might just bring Nguyen back from the dead and save us all the trouble of dealing with his inconvenient prophecy. He took a deep breath. Heimdall and Saga will work with you on removing whatever kind of cloak you've created. Vali and Sandra, Marcus said, motioning toward a muscular man and svelte woman on the opposite side of the room from Heimdall and Saga, will take turns heading your bodyguards. Don't let Sandra's size fool you. She's as vicious and clever a warrior as ever has lived. Thank you, grandfather, the slight woman said. Pale, dark-haired, and pretty, she had a childlike quality to her features. When I am away, Carlyle runs the entire Hiru compound, including the guards covering the perimeter and grounds. If you intend to leave this building, you must let him know. Marcus stepped in front of me, holding my stubborn gaze with his own. I mean it, Lex. Messwet. You may leave the main house and explore the grounds and other buildings as you wish, but you will tell Carlyle first. Do you understand? Yes, Haru, I said, and he flinched. His eyes seemed to plead with me to understand, to forgive. Nefi and Josh will remain in your vicinity whenever their excavation duties allow. Dominic has volunteered to be your chief bodyguard and attendant. He will keep a room adjoining yours and remain near you at all times. Anything you need, you can get through him. It was utterly insane, all of it. I was overwhelmed with the sudden significance of my existence and my position among my people. I didn't ask for it. I didn't want it. 2 weeks earlier, I had been Alexandra Larson, archaeologist, sperm donor baby, and possible lunatic. 2 days earlier, I'd been Alexandra Larson Ivanov, archaeologist, Nezharet, and Marcus Bahur's potential love interest. But those had all been eclipsed by my current identity. Alexandra, Messwet, prophesied savior of the Nezharets. Who would I become next? What would I become? And you? I asked the tall, striking man who held my heart in his deadly hand. What's your role? I am Haru, he stated simply, his 3 words squeezing my heart until it ruptured. Are you? Overwhelming bitterness and disappointment colored my next words. My apologies. I mistook you for someone else. For a man. I won't make the same mistake again, Haru. With each syllable, traces of my Marcus chipped away, revealing the arrogance and coldness, the blood and death of Haru. I could no longer tell if my Marcus had ever really existed. I cleared my throat, a vain attempt to shove away my heartbreak, my desire to cry, and turned away from him. Blinking away tears, I said, I thank you all for your service, and I look forward to getting to know each of you better. Now, if it's not too much trouble, I'd like to rest for a few hours. It's been a long night. Dominic earned my instant and immutable love when he rushed to my side, saying, I'll show you to your suite, Messwet. He draped a comforting arm around my shoulders and hustled me from the room. I wasn't far enough away, or they didn't speak quietly enough, when the argument started. What the hell are you doing? Nefi hissed. What must be done, came Marcus's reply. You're trying to go around it, to avoid it with your idiocy. You cannot stop it from happening. You cannot prevent her from being the Messwet by pretending, she yelled. It's too late. The last was a shriek worthy of a banshee. Marcus's cold voice responded like a whiplash. Remember your place, daughter. And you remember yours, father. She is already too far gone for what you're about to do. It won't work, and I've never seen you so affected. You're in deeper than she is. For her sake, if not for yours, don't do this. Mark my words, Haru, Nefi said, spitting her father's name like a curse. You will ruin us all if you persist with this charade. Their argument continued, but Dominic and I were finally far enough away that only the muffled sounds of angry voices reached my ears. I reveled in the release from their harsh words. I didn't know why Marcus was behaving so coldly toward me, and I was hurt enough that, at the moment, I didn't want to find out. Dominic tightened his hold. Don't worry, sister. Everything will work out in the end. I know it. An incessant rhythmic vibration on the bedside table woke me from dreamless sleep. Dominic had settled me in an enormous, unfamiliar bed and given me some water and a small orange pill, promising it would bring true rest rather than the fitful half-echoes that frequently plagued Arkine's dreams. I fumbled for my buzzing cell phone and tried several times to touch the screen's answer button before succeeding. "Hello," I croaked. Coughing softly, I cleared my throat. "Lex, is it really you?" I groaned. "Hi, Kara. Yes, it's me." "Oh my God! I feel like I haven't talked to you in forever. How are you? Are you okay?" "Did she hear about the dead bodies in my apartment? Was it on the news?" "I'm horrible, lost, broken-hearted, pissed off, scared, worried, overwhelmed." "I'm fine. How are you?" Good, I guess. Worried about you. What's been going on with you? I haven't been able to get a hold of you since New Year's," Kara whined. "Oh, yeah, sorry. I guess she hasn't heard about the dead men." "With my mom here and then the quarter starting, it's been kind of crazy." I explained, repeating the excuses I'd given her days ago and withholding pretty much everything else. "Great, I am becoming just like my parents, Grandma Suze, Alexander, and Marcus." Picturing Marcus, I squeezed my eyes shut, willing away my sudden, roiling despair. "Okay, well, I'm glad you're okay." "Thanks." I rolled over at the sound of a door opening and waved at Dominic. He was standing in the open doorway joining our 2 bedrooms. "I'm fine," I mouthed, and he slipped back into his space, leaving the door ajar. Privacy, I noted, was quickly becoming a thing of the past. I really, really missed it. "So, could we meet up for lunch or something soon?" she asked. "I miss you, Lex." "No, but I wish we could." "Kara, it's only been 2 weeks. We've gone way longer than this without speaking or seeing each other before." "Yeah, well, we've never gone so long after one of us almost died," she screeched. "I'm fine, I swear," I told her. She scoffed. I was quickly wearing down her thin veneer of patience. "Come on, Lex. When can we get together? Annie's worried about you too." Frantically, I tried to think of an excuse. I could hardly tell her the truth, that I was being held captive for my own good because I was the subject of a millennial-old prophecy. "I don't know. It's complicated. I'm out of town for the excavation for a while." "For how long?" "A while," I repeated. "Which is?" "A while?" I offered again. "Nice try, Sugar Lips. What's going on, really?" "I'm out of town for the excavation for a while." "Is it a guy?" she asked. Sometimes I could have sworn she was part bloodhound. "Kara, I'm out of town." "Geesh, repeat much?" "So when are you back?" she asked. "Honestly, I don't know. The director is kind of a dick," I explained. I heard Dominic snort loudly in his room, and I smiled. "Oh, well, do you think it'd be possible to get my dress back?" "The dress I was almost date raped in? Who wouldn't want that?" "Sure, it's at the dry cleaners. I hadn't had the balls to pick it up." "Oh, which one?" "College Suds on the Ave. It should be ready by now," I told her. "Great, thanks. I have a date next week with this totally hot younger guy. He's a personal trainer, aka Yummy." "That sounds awesome, Kara." I tried to sound enthusiastic, but the emotion refused to form to back my words. "You sure you're okay?" Kara asked suspiciously. "Yeah," I replied. "Just tired." "Oh, well, I'll let you go then." She's definitely getting pissed. "Okay, thanks. But you have to promise to call me soon and tell me everything that's going on in your crazy Egyptologist life." "Maybe not too pissed." I laughed. "Okay, I promise." "Good." Bye, Lex. Bye, I mumbled as the line disconnected. I stretched, wondering if I could fall back asleep. A knock at the door to the sitting room adjacent to what was now my bedroom ruined my plans. Marcus hadn't been joking when he'd said I would have my own suite. My cluster of rooms consisted of a sitting room, which also had the only door out to the second-floor hallway, a bedroom with an adjoining full bathroom, and a smaller bedroom, Dominic's room, with doors to both my bedroom and the sitting room. It was all very medieval. Okay, I'm going to author's note to address a question, which is, do we think the young guy is one of Set's cult? I want to hang on to this question to talk about later. I heard the door in the sitting room open and Dominic say, I don't know if it's best to tell her about this right now. A few seconds later, Sandra followed Neffy into my new lavish bedroom. The curvaceous beauty waved the smaller, deadlier woman away. She'll be fine with me, my dear, I promise. Though you may remain if the Meswat wishes. Neffy looked to me for my opinion. When I shook my head, my petite bodyguard left the room. My niece is diligent, but can be a bit overzealous at times, Neffy said as she approached my bedside. She shot an irritated glance at Dominic's open door, but dismissed it with a roll of her luminous amber eyes. Darker, but so much like Marcus's. I sighed. Not Marcus. Haru. Please, sit, Neffy. What is it? I asked, propping myself up with pillows. I wasn't used to receiving guests in bed, but I considered it one of the issues accordant with being a messiah. It was annoying. I didn't want to be a messiah. It's my father, she said, pulling a burnt orange suede armchair nearer to the bed. He's been unreasonable, more so than usual, and you deserve to know what's going on. Okay, what's going on? Don't get me wrong, it's not like I like you or anything, she told me bluntly. I took a slow, deep breath. Right, so... But I do love my father, even if we tend to fight each other like scorpions, and he's done something that will hurt you both, and I really don't think it's necessary. Neffy, just tell me. He left, she explained, without explaining anything. Marcus left? Where? When? How long? And how long will he be gone? I asked. Was it me? Did I drive him away? It only intended to give as much cold bitchiness as I got, and it had been coming off Marcus in waves, but I now feared I had gone too far. Precisely, Neffy said, sounding so much like her father that my heart ached. He's being an idiot, by the way. He's been focused on Nguyen's prophecy for so long that the real world rose up and bit him in the ass without warning. Except it wasn't the real world. It was you and his precious prophecy. I should have realized what was going on earlier. How was I so blind? Neffy, you know I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. I know, she exclaimed. I think that's why I find you so infuriating. You weren't raised like us, and you don't know our customs, so why are you the Meswet? Because Set decided to impregnate my mom? I offered dryly. I suppose you are correct. It's not really your fault, I know, she said, looking sort of ashamed. But my father, he's going to ruin everything. Right, that explains so much. I was getting the impression that Nezarite minds worked quite a bit differently from that of regular Homo sapiens. I sighed, not doing a very good job of hiding my exasperation. And how exactly is he going to ruin everything? I asked. You must understand him, his past. He's been trying to work around Nguyen's prophecy for thousands of years. His vehemence that it could be avoided. It's started wars. It's split the council down the middle. And he left now because... I urged. Because of the part of Nguyen's prophecy that he left out when he was explaining it to you, Neffy said sadly. She started reciting. Heru will look after the girl child, and she will trust him. Heru will set his heart on the girl child, and she will trust him above all others. Heru will make her his she-falcon, and she will bind herself to him. What does it mean by she-falcon? I asked. According to my father and everyone else who knew him, Nguyen was quite the wordsmith. By she-falcon, he was referring to Haru's match, the woman who would bring him to heel and force him to remember certain deeper pleasures, not just sex, but companionship and love. In modern terms, I suppose it would be called his soulmate. I was just a little girl, but I remember my father being furious when he read the prophecy on Senenmut's tablet for the first time. She shook her head, her dark as night waves brushing back and forth over her shoulders. Perhaps it was because he loathed the idea of being bound to anyone. For so long he's been arrogant, cold, and frustrating. Her amber gaze sharpened. But with you he's so vibrantly alive, so completely engaged. It was unexpected. I'm sure you couldn't understand why I was so upset the day you overheard our argument. Yes, I understand, I said, in truth understanding very little. And now he's gone away? Neffy looked down at her hands, which were clasped discreetly in her lap. Yes, Meswet. He thought going away would dampen the feelings between the two of you, preventing the binding and nullifying Nguyen's prophecy. Without one verse, how could the others be true? She shrugged gracefully. At least, that's how he's looking at it. I turned away from her too familiar eyes. I understood why he'd left. It was an ingenious plan. Rather, it would have been an ingenious plan if I hadn't already fallen for him. A silent tear leaked from the corner of my eye and trailed down my cheek. He wasn't trying to hurt you, Meswet. I know it, Neffy proclaimed desperately. My father didn't want to leave. He loved... That is enough, Neffy, Dominic said, placing a hand on her shoulder. She needs to rest, not troublesome thoughts. Leave us. Fury flashed across her face, but she responded, Yes, my lord. To me, she pleaded, Don't forsake him. He already has his heart set on you, whether or not he realizes it. Swiftly, she swept out of the room. I feel like I'm being shredded into a million little pieces, I said to the ceiling. My voice was high and wobbly. Dominic sat on the same chair in which Neffy had been sitting, directly beside the bed. I know, Lex. How do I make it stop? You don't, he said quietly, grasping my hand. I curled into a ball around his arm and began to cry. Part 2. The Haru Compound. Bainbridge Island, Washington. Chapter 20. Enemies and Friends. Sandwiched between Dominic and Josh at the plaintiff's table in a courtroom on the 8th floor of the King County Courthouse, I waited anxiously for the jury to emerge and share their verdict. Marcus had been gone for nearly 2 months, and though every minute of every day had been filled with learning how to be the Meswet to my people, honing my Nezarite skills, preparing for the excavation, and attempting to get Mike an extended stay behind bars, I never stopped thinking about him, missing him, hating him, possibly even loving him. It was the 12th day of the trial, and I couldn't wait for it to be over, regardless of the verdict. The entire time it had been impossible to ignore one particularly sharp gaze digging into the back of my skull. Seth was sitting in the front row on Mike's side of the courtroom, and I refused to look at him. Not that it had been brought up during the trial, but he, my own biological father, had been the one who had sent Mike the text ordering him to use the drugged lip balm. I consoled myself by thinking that Mike, who had entered the courtroom every day using a cane and walking with an obvious limp, wouldn't be at peak raping performance for a long time. Unfortunately, his miserable-looking physical state seemed to earn him sympathetic looks from jury members throughout the trial. "You're positive that last witness was your friend?" Dominic asked, referring to Kara. I thought back on her testimony and scowled. The defending lawyer, with the black lines of a conspicuous set animal peeking out above the back of his collar, had asked her, "And you're certain the plaintiff was excited about the date with the defendant?" "Yes, very," Kara had responded. She'd refused to look in my direction. "Did the plaintiff talk about having sexual relations with the defendant?" Yes, she was excited and nervous.
Why was she nervous?
Because she hadn't been with anyone for a long time, Kara had explained helpfully. I'd never wanted to disappear more in my life. My parents, Jenny and Grandma Suze, were sitting less than a dozen feet behind me.
Is there any additional reason she was nervous?
Kara had bit her lip before answering.
Yes, she had a dream that the date ended in rape.
The audience gasped. Her words had been like sharp, invisible daggers stabbing into my back. Why would she ever volunteer that information? Why? I had wondered, feeling unbearably betrayed.
And do you think it's possible that the plaintiff wanted her disturbed fantasy to play out?
I don't...
No, nobody would want that.
Kara had seemed to suddenly wake up from the spell of disloyalty that had her in its thrall.
The plaintiff went to a great effort to entice the defendant, did she not? The attorney had asked.
Kara had sounded defeated when she'd replied.
Yes. What did she do to entice him?
She borrowed a dress from me, and our other friend helped her do her hair, Kara had answered.
No further questions, Your Honor,
Mike's lawyer had said, shooting me a smug grin as he'd returned to his seat. I shook my head, dispelling the disturbing memory of Kara's testimony. I used to think she was one of my best friends, but I don't know anymore, I told Dominic. Okay, author's note, back to that question, which was, is the guy who Kara's dating attached to Set? In my mind, yes, somehow there was a connection, and that he coerced her into betraying Lex like this. Had you been considering confiding the truth of your nature to any humans, might I suggest avoiding her? He whispered. Thanks for the tip, I whispered back. Some of the heightened Nezarette ears in the audience had heard us, and Set barked a laugh. Dominic, Josh, and I shared an irritated look. Alexander had called in additional bodyguards from our familial line as soon as my deranged father appeared on the first day of the trial. Filled with slightly too large and undeniably perfect people, the courtroom looked like the setting for a cheesy primetime legal drama. Has anyone been able to get a hold of him? I asked Dominic, referring to my absentee patron and the breaker of my heart. Dominic shook his head, and the corners of his thin lips turned down. He's ignoring us, at least before this farce started. He waved his hand, indicating the courtroom. We knew he was alive. Every day included a dozen emails, calls, and texts checking up on you. Are you sure you want to get involved with him? He's proving to be a bit obsessive.
Dom,
I warned. Ever since Marcus abandoned me in his secure compound, my half-brother had been slipping in little criticisms of his behavior whenever possible. It had been 2 months, and the reminders of Marcus's flaws were beyond getting old. They were mummified. But Dominic was also the one who comforted me every time I broke down, which I was ashamed to admit happened on a daily basis. Sometimes it was about Marcus, sometimes it was about being the mess wet, and sometimes it was just about feeling completely and utterly lost in what had become my life. Right, apologies, Dominic said, letting his French accent deepen and flashing his killer smile. Just don't let him get off too easy when he finally realizes his mistake and returns. Not a chance, I agreed. Josh whispered, Would you guys mind saving this private conversation for somewhere a little more private? He hitched his head toward the rows of Nezarettes with exceptional hearing packed into the courtroom. They were all sitting quietly, intently focused on something. On us. Heightened senses, it turned out, was just another genetic trait coded into our Nezarette DNA. My hearing and sight had been improving noticeably, though neither had yet developed the sensitivity of a fully manifested Nezarette, and it was proving to be less of a perk than I had expected. Falling asleep was not as easy as it used to be, especially not when I could hear almost everything people were saying or doing in nearby rooms. I opened my mouth to respond at the exact moment the door to the jury room opened, announcing the return of the jury. The 12 men and women filed back to their seats, none looking at me as the jury announced its verdict of not guilty to a half-outraged, half-ecstatic courtroom. I bowed my head to hide an inappropriate smile. I'd been doing something I wasn't supposed to do, peering into the possible futures to find out when Marcus might return. After the first time I'd done it, Saga and Heimdall had explained to me that not only was it against Nezareth law to look into the future aught without council approval, it was also a major faux pas. With our heightened senses and ability to peek into the past, we had little enough privacy, and looking into someone's future uninvited was a serious invasion of that precious commodity. Heeding their advice, I had continued searching for Marcus's return, but had stopped telling them about it. What I'd learned in the aught was the cause for my smile. In all the futures I viewed, losing the trial signaled Marcus's immediate return. "Come on, Lex, let's get you out of here. The press is going to become more and more voracious the longer they have to wait," Dominic said. How my date rape case against Mike had piqued the interest of the mainstream media baffled me, but I suspected Set's meddlesome hands were pulling the strings. Anything to make my life harder seemed to tickle him pink. I really didn't like him. "I'm not talking to the press," I told Dominic vehemently. Josh had signaled for Sandra, Volley, and 5 of my largest bodyguards to meet me in the aisle. After quick words, Sandra hustled away, corralling several dozen more Nezareth bodyguards with her. "Nobody wants to talk to the press," Dominic said, guiding me toward the aisle. "But they want to talk to you. We'll get you through the crowd as quickly as possible. The car's already waiting." Sadly, I nodded, and then I turned to my waiting family. "Oh, sweetie, we're so sorry that cretin is getting away with what he did to you," my mom said between sobs. I gave her a hug, unable to tell her that Nezareth justice would take over since the human version had failed, and Nezareth justice was far harsher. "It's okay, Mom. I'm just glad it's over," I told her, and I meant it. Reliving the awful experience in the aught was one thing, but recounting every detail repeatedly before a packed courtroom was another entirely. Besides, I was tired of all the character bashing and victim blame. My father wrapped his arms around us both.
"Someday, Lily, that little shit will pay for what he did."
I really didn't like the note of promise in his voice. "I know, Dad. Someday he will pay. Just don't do anything stupid. Like personally getting revenge on your daughter's attempted rapist." "Miss Sweat," Dominic whispered, loud enough for me to hear, but too quiet for my parents' human ears to pick up. It was time to go. "I'm really sorry, Mom, Dad." I peeked over their shoulders to offer a tight smile to Jenny and Grandma Suze, "but I absolutely have to get back to work. I'm lucky the director didn't kick me off the team for taking so much time with the trial," I said, squeezing them one last time. "I'm proud of you for taking this so well, sweetie," my mom said tearfully. "You had such a rough few months." She was referring not only to her revelation about my parentage, but also to what Seattle police had deemed a freak gang showdown that had taken place in my apartment while I'd been out. I definitely didn't feel the need to correct that mistaken assumption, and, of course, the trial. I pulled away, my motions hesitant. I really did miss my family. "I'll talk to you soon, okay?" I promised. "Of course, sweetie," my mom said, closely followed by my father's.
"We love you, Lex."
Turning away, I willed myself not to cry. As Dominic sprang to my side and 6 bodyguards encircled us, I wondered for the 1,000th time how odd my entourage must have looked to my parents. How were they justifying the scene in their minds? They hadn't mentioned anything about it to me. Perhaps they thought the excavation director was a paranoid billionaire concerned with losing his ancient languages specialist. Or maybe they thought he was simply a billionaire who had become enamored with their little girl. "Lex! I'm sorry, Lex!" Kara shouted from outside my cocoon of muscle. "Lex, please say you'll forgive me." I ignored her and continued out of the courtroom, across a wide marble hallway to the elevators, and down to the waiting throng of reporters. Stupid Set. To my immense relief, Sandra and dozens of Nezareth guards had managed to create a pathway from the courthouse door to my waiting car. I wouldn't have to speak to a single microphone. I wouldn't have to speak into a single microphone about the injustice of the verdict. I wouldn't have to listen politely as a reporter badgered me into an emotional reaction or shocking revelation. I wanted to crow with delight or possibly kiss the small woman. She was a tactical genius and a killer chess player. I had yet to beat her, and we played almost every evening. It was my favorite part of MESPUT training, learning how to think strategically via chess. Dominic opened the black sedan's rear door, helped me into the back seat, and then took his own place in the front passenger seat. Neffy was already sitting in the back seat, grinning knowingly. Neffy, you know that's not the appropriate reaction to losing a trial, right? I asked her suspiciously. The more I'd gotten to know her, the more I'd grown to appreciate her oddities. And she had many of them. She raised a single arched eyebrow and said, "He's back. He's waiting for you at the compound." Relief flooded my body, and I finally felt like I could breathe. It's about time. Thanks for listening to the Read by the Author podcast. To find out what happens next in the story, stay tuned for the next episode. You can also find Echo in Time, as well as the rest of the Echo Trilogy, in ebook, paperback, and professionally narrated audiobook format through all major book retailers, and libraries too. Until next time, happy reading!